Our cameras today captured pool maintenance underway in the backyard of Nancy Guthrie's home. Earlier this week, a delivery driver accidentally tried to drop off a pizza at the front door, and that prompted a social media statement from the sheriff's department saying in part, quote, "We can't believe we have to say this, but media on scene, please do not order food delivery to a crime scene address."
2 men, 1 coordinated plan, and an 84-year-old woman who vanished from her home in the middle of the night without making a sound. No screaming, no signs of struggle, no witnesses. And the people closest to her have said almost nothing for weeks. Here is what the mainstream coverage keeps getting wrong. Every major outlet has been focused on finding one suspect, one person under that ski mask. But the physical evidence collected at this scene has never supported that conclusion, not from day one, because 2 separate DNA profiles were recovered from evidence in this case. 2 unknown males, neither one matching Nancy Guthrie, neither one matching her family, and neither one hitting a single record inside the FBI database containing over 19 million known offender profiles. 1 DNA sample came from biological material recovered inside Nancy's home. The second came from a glove found 2 miles away from the property. 2 people, 2 separate locations, 1 crime.
Break a little news on your program here that I spoke with a detective earlier today, and effective Monday, this investigation will essentially be moved to the task force entirely.
That is why the single suspect framing has always been wrong. The evidence has been pointing at a team from the beginning. Welcome to Weather Drives. If you watched part 1, you already have the background on this case. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, mother of NBC Today Show anchor. Savannah Guthrie reported missing from her home in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson, Arizona on February 1st. No forced entry, no body recovered, no arrest made. Today, we are not covering the basics. We are talking about 2 specific individuals whose names have been connected to this investigation since the start.
There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that absolutely they are looking into, and every single night, yeah, I think the sheriff saying that the subject should be scared, that's without a doubt.
Yeah.
2 men with a 19-year relationship. And I want to be clear before we go any further. I am not accusing anyone of a crime. I am walking through publicly documented information and laying out what the evidence shows when you put it all together in one place. So let us start with the timeline inside that house. Nancy's doorbell camera went offline at 1:47 in the morning. Her pacemaker lost its Bluetooth signal to her iPhone at 2:28 a.m. That is a 41-minute gap. 41 minutes that someone spent inside that home in the middle of the night. For context, professional burglars typically operate on 5-minute windows. 10 minutes inside an occupied home is high risk. 20 minutes is considered reckless. 41 minutes is not panic. 41 minutes is someone who is completely comfortable inside that house. Think about what had to happen in that window. Nancy had to be located. She had to be physically controlled. The county sheriff himself described her as mentally sharp and alert. She had to be prepared for transport, moved through the house, guided through the dark, and loaded into a vehicle outside, all while someone simultaneously watched the exits and made sure no neighbor triggered a light. One person executing all of that at the same time is not a workable plan. Former FBI negotiator Chip Massey said publicly that physically managing an elderly person during a forced removal while handling operational logistics simultaneously is beyond what a single individual can reliably sustain. 2 people divides that load. 1 handles Nancy directly, 1 manages the perimeter. The 41 minutes stops being reckless and starts being methodical. Now, here is where this case moves beyond a standard crime investigation, because what happened in the weeks before February 1st was not spontaneous. It was preparation. On January 23rd, 9 days before Nancy was taken, someone walked backward past a home located 6.5 meters from Nancy's property. Backward. That is not random. Consumer security cameras like Ring and Nest run on passive infrared sensors. The camera is dormant until body heat activates it. Then it needs roughly 1 to 2 seconds to boot up, adjust the lens, and start recording. Walk toward a camera normally, and those first 2 seconds capture your face directly. Walk backward, and by the time the camera is actually recording, all it sees is the back of your head. So this person understood the specific gap between sensor activation and recording start well enough to exploit it deliberately. Then a dog barked nearby. Most people spin around by instinct. This individual kept their backward orientation while moving away faster. They suppressed a basic reflex because getting 1 frame of their face on camera was not an option. 9 days later, on February 1st, the same Ozark Trail backpack with the same reflective strips appeared on Nancy's front porch. But this time, the behavior was completely different. The suspect walked directly toward the camera. He reached out and tapped the lens twice, unhurried, like someone touching something familiar. January 23rd was the test run. When no police responded the next morning, he confirmed the approach worked. By February 1st, the testing was finished. Down, he was executing the operation. Now I want to lay out a framework that puts every piece of this evidence into context. In any coordinated criminal operation involving more than one person, there are typically two distinct roles, the architect and the operative. The architect never physically appears at the scene. His value is information. He knows the floor plan, the camera positions, the gate code, the medication schedule, the security setup, and the neighborhood patterns. He has spent years moving through that environment and never needed to conduct any external surveillance because the knowledge was already his. The operative provides the physical capability, the willingness to walk through a door at 2 in the morning, the experience to manage a live situation under pressure, the physical description that ends up on the FBI bulletin.
We've all acknowledged there's a ransom note. It appears to me that the investigators aren't 100% convinced it's legit.
And here is who those roles appear to fit in this case, based entirely on public records and documented information. Tommaso Cioni, 50 years old, born in Tuscany, Italy, married to Annie Guthrie, Nancy's eldest daughter, since 2006. That is 20 years of marriage, 20 years of family dinners, 20 years of walking through Nancy's front door, past her cameras, through her security gate, and through her home. He teaches advanced placement biology at a charter school in Tucson. He also plays bass guitar in a local band. And he was the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. On the evening of January 31st, Tommaso personally drove Nancy home from dinner. The sheriff confirmed to the New York Times that he walked her to her front door at approximately 9:50 p.m., watched her go inside, then drove 4 miles back to his own home. So 3 hours and 57 minutes later, the doorbell camera went dark. No independently verified alibi for Tommaso during that window has ever been made public. He and his wife Annie share a home. Whatever alibi one of them provides, the other can confirm. That is not independent corroboration. Consider what someone with his level of access to that home would already know without conducting a single minute of external surveillance. He would know those Nest cameras were not actually recording. Nancy did not have an active cloud storage subscription. The cameras could detect motion and send alerts, but no footage was being saved. The FBI had to contact Google directly to recover fragmented residual data from back-end servers. The only people who would know those cameras were non-functional are people who spent significant time inside that home and quietly noticed the storage subscription was never activated. He would know the front security gate, the iron gate the suspect passed through on February 1st without leaving a single pry mark or tool impression. No damage at all. Either Nancy had left it unlocked, which is entirely possible for a woman who had felt safe in the same home for 40 years, or someone had made sure it would be open. Someone who had been standing at that exact gate hours earlier saying goodnight. He would know the medications sitting on the counter. Nancy's essential daily prescriptions were left behind during those 41 minutes. For a ransom operation, those medications are the most critical items in the entire house. Eliza is an 84-year-old with a pacemaker and heart condition who does not receive her daily medication, does not survive long enough for any ransom to be collected. Leaving those pills behind means one of two things. Either the person who took her had no idea about her medical needs, or they already knew she would not need them. And then there is the Olympic schedule. Savannah Guthrie was assigned to cover the Winter Olympics for NBC months in advance. Nancy was taken on the exact weekend Savannah was scheduled to be on the other side of the world. If you wanted to target Nancy during a window when her most prominent family member was unavailable and occupied, who would know that travel calendar? Someone who heard it mentioned at a family dinner. One more detail that matters here. Tommaso Cioni teaches AP biology at the college level. So his students learn PCR amplification, the same core technique forensic labs use to process crime scene DNA. They learn gel electrophoresis, the same method used to build the genetic profiles entered into federal databases. The suspect on the porch wore black nitrile gloves, the same gloves used in every biology classroom in the country. Nitrile gloves are rated for chemical resistance, not forensic prevention. Microtears form during physical exertion, especially around the fingertips. Internal moisture builds up within minutes. If you are wearing nitrile gloves while physically handling another person, lifting them, controlling their movement, that moisture can breach the material. A biology teacher would understand that completely. Which means a biology teacher would also understand to dispose of those gloves miles from the scene rather than anywhere near the property. Someone found a glove anyway, 2 miles from Nancy's home. DNA from an unknown male inside it. Not in CODIS. No match. Tommaso Cioni has no criminal record. His DNA is not in CODIS. If that glove contained his DNA, the result in the database would look exactly the way it currently looks. Unknown. No match. Now here is where the second individual enters this picture. Because everything I just described about Tommaso points toward one specific role. The planner, the insider, the person whose value was information and access rather than physical presence at the scene. But someone still had to physically walk up to that porch at 2 in the morning. And the FBI's description of that person is specific. All male, 5'9" to 5'10", average build, ski mask, dark clothing, nitrile gloves, Ozark trail backpack. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente noted what appeared to be a tattoo or distinctive marking visible on the suspect's right wrist. Dominic Aaron Lee Evans, 48 years old, elementary school teacher in Tucson, drummer in a local band called Early Black alongside Tommaso Cioni since 2007, 19 years together. They connected through classified ads. Evans found a guitarist through Craigslist. Cioni responded to a listing in the Tucson Weekly. They recorded their debut album together at Loveland Studios in late 2009. They named it Life, Love, Murder. Evans stands at approximately 5'9", average build, publicly photographed with a mustache and goatee that matches the FBI physical description. And in publicly available performance footage from Early Black, there is a marking visible on his right wrist that is consistent with what Jim Clemente described from the FBI surveillance footage. Height, build, facial hair, wrist marking. Every data point in the FBI's physical description corresponds to Dominic Evans. Evans also has felony records in Pima County: burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. These are not rumors or allegations. These are entries in the Pima County Judicial Database. Burglary is unlawful entry into a structure with intent to commit a crime inside it. Robbery is the taking of property from a person through force or intimidation. The documented criminal history in those records overlaps with what happened inside Nancy Guthrie's home. And here is the forensic detail that matters. Neither DNA profile from this case matched anything in CODIS. For someone with multiple felony convictions, the absence from that federal database requires an explanation. Arizona's DNA collection laws have changed over time. If Evans' convictions predate the mandatory collection protocols for those specific offense categories, or if those cases resolved through plea agreements that did not trigger DNA submission requirements, he could carry a documented criminal history in the court system while remaining completely invisible to federal DNA databases. A criminal record and no DNA on file. Evans told the New York Times he had met Nancy Guthrie exactly once at an Easter egg hunt in 2011. He said he learned about her disappearance through Instagram and reached out to Tommaso privately to offer support. So a national kidnapping case is dominating every platform. Your bandmate's mother-in-law is the victim at the center of the story. And your first move is a private message to the man at the center of the investigation. That could be a friend offering genuine support, but it could also be a post-operational contact, a status check framed as concern. The question is not whether the message was sent. Evans confirmed that himself. The question is what investigators found when they pulled the metadata, the timing, and whether the private communication pattern between Evans and Cioni shifted in the weeks leading up to February 1st. Evans said investigators interviewed him for 40 minutes and have not been back in touch. 40 minutes is a preliminary conversation, not a forensic investigation. The fact that they have not called him back could mean they cleared him. Or it could mean they no longer need his cooperation because the evidence being built through cell tower data, purchase records, vehicle tracking, and genetic genealogy does not require anyone to sit in a room and answer questions. The sheriff publicly cleared the immediate family, all siblings and spouses. Dominic Evans is not a sibling. He is not a spouse. He is a bandmate. And his name did not appear once in that public statement. Now, I want to address the gear argument because it keeps coming up in comment sections. The suspect showed up in a $20 Ozark Trail backpack from Walmart with reflective safety strips still attached, a cheap ski mask, a belly band holster configured incorrectly over a thick jacket. Firearms expert John Correa stated publicly that nobody with even 1 day of tactical training would wear a holster that way. The argument from people defending Cioni is that an AP biology teacher would never look that operationally unprepared. The gear is too cheap. The setup is too sloppy. Consider the opposite angle. If you are an educated person planning a serious crime you cannot afford to be associated with, one of the most important things you control is the investigative profile that gets built to describe you. Show up in professional tactical gear with proper equipment, and FBI profilers construct a description of a highly organized, disciplined, educated individual. That profile narrows quickly toward people like science teachers. Now, but show up in clearance aisle gear with the holster on backward and the reflective strip still glowing under infrared, and FBI profilers describe a disorganized, impulsive, low-level offender, someone who has never executed anything serious. And investigators stop looking at the methodical educator 4 miles away. That is not incompetence. That is a deliberate choice about how to be perceived. And based on 6 weeks of media coverage, it has been working. The vehicle. Elias and Danielle, a couple living approximately 2.5 miles from Nancy's property on a residential back road, captured 12 vehicles passing on their Ring camera between midnight and 6 a.m. on February 1st. One appeared at 2:36 in the morning. Nancy's pacemaker disconnected at 2:28. So, an NBC correspondent drove the route between Nancy's home and that camera location and timed it at 6 minutes. 2:28 plus 6 minutes puts that vehicle at 2:34. It appears on camera at 2:36, a 2-minute margin, consistent with a driver who pulled out of Nancy's street, removed a mask, and then drove onto that back road. Retired NYPD Detective Pat Brosnan assessed the vehicle as a Kia Soul. The sheriff confirmed to NBC that the vehicle timing aligns with the abduction window and is part of the active investigation. That couple's home sits outside the 2-mile search radius law enforcement originally canvassed. Nobody knocked on their door. They came forward on their own. How many other cameras between 2 and 5 miles from Nancy's home captured something relevant that nobody has reviewed yet? The ransom demand was $6 million in Bitcoin. Not 5 million, not 10. 6 million. Specific. That is the kind of figure that reflects knowledge of actual finances. A stranger guessing at a ransom picks a round number. An insider who has been sitting at the same dinner table for 20 years and heard real conversations about real money lands on 6 million. But here is why the financial motive does not hold up. The FBI sent a small test deposit to that Bitcoin wallet immediately after receiving the demand. Standard investigative procedure. That wallet has been completely silent ever since. 0 transactions, not a single movement. People who understand cryptocurrency know there are privacy tools that make tracing Bitcoin movement extremely difficult. If this was genuinely about collecting money, someone would have at least tested a small transaction. Nothing has happened. The silence of that wallet confirms what the medications on the counter already indicated. The ransom demand was never about collecting money. It was a narrative device designed to push investigators toward a financial motive. And then there is the language in one of those ransom communications. One note used the phrase, the main individual. You do not describe yourself as the main individual unless there are secondary individuals operating under you. That single phrase described the structure of a 2-person operation inside a ransom note. 19 years of band rehearsals, 19 years of a drummer reading a bassist's movement before it happens, responding to cues that never needed to be spoken. That level of coordination does not stay inside a rehearsal room, but 2-person criminal operations always have a breaking point. The moment arrives when one person realizes the other would let them take the full weight of everything to survive. In this case, that moment may already be here. Because the FBI is not waiting for a confession. DNA processing is underway at a private laboratory in Florida. The mixed biological sample from inside Nancy's home is being analyzed. The glove profile may resolve first because it appears to be a cleaner sample. When those profiles complete, they enter genealogy databases. A partial match to a distant relative is the only thread investigators need. 2 DNA profiles means 2 independent family trees, 2 separate chances for a genetic hit. Cell tower records do not require anyone to talk. Purchase histories do not require a confession. 10,000 hours of surveillance footage do not need a witness to come forward. The evidence is building on its own. Savannah Guthrie announced a $1 million cash reward. Anonymous tips accepted. $1 million makes loyalty very difficult to maintain. On March 2nd, exactly 1 month after Nancy disappeared, Tommaso Cioni appeared in public for the first time since the night she was taken. He walked with Annie and Savannah to the memorial outside Nancy's home. No statement, no interview, no direct message to whoever has Nancy, just a public appearance at the 1-month mark with cameras present. That was his first public appearance in nearly 5 weeks. The man who drove Nancy home on the last night she was seen. And silent for a month while his wife posted emotional videos asking for help. Silent while Savannah made public appeals and offered a $1 million reward. Grief does not operate that way. It looks for any outlet it can find. Deliberate silence over 5 weeks is a choice. And it is specifically the choice that people make when an attorney has advised them that anything they say could be used as evidence. The DNA is being processed. The genealogy databases are active. The vehicle footage exists. The cell tower data has been pulled. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. If someone watching this saw something that did not make sense, a late-night vehicle, a conversation that felt off, a purchase that seemed unusual, the tip line is active. The reward is $1 million in cash. Call 1-800-CALL-FBI. And subscribe to Weather Drives and turn on notifications. When this case moves forward, we will cover every development as it happens. Part 3 is coming.